Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Kelly Lothar Pereira, leading the CDLC this term. And I'm so glad that you could make it to our workshop today by Dr. Debra Holzberg. I'm going to introduce her right now. Dr. Holzberg is a clinical assistant professor and research associate at the University of UNCG. Her research focuses on the self-advocacy and academic skills relative to the transition of students with hidden disabilities to post-secondary education. Courses that she teaches include the Survey of Learning and Behavior Disorders, Universal Design for Learning, Teaching Exceptional Learners in the General Curriculum. I think that's the first part of that course, and Transition Through the Age Span. Dr. Holzberg has presented at numerous local, state, and national conferences on a variety of topics, including the transition to post-secondary education, self-advocacy, and the use of evidence-based practices to teach academics for secondary students with disabilities. Additionally, Dr. Holzberg has co-authored book chapters and has articles published in the area of universal design for learning, secondary transition, self-advocacy, and evidence-based practices. And in addition to her scholarship and teaching activities, Dr. Holzberg is active in several subdivisions of the Council for Exceptional Children, including the Division on Career Development and Transition, the Division for Learning Disabilities, and the Educators with Disabilities Caucus. She also serves as the co-editor for the New Times for DLD. So welcome, Dr. Holzberg, and we will pass it on to you for your workshop.
Her mic is muted.
Am I good? Can you hear me now? Okay, thanks. Okay, so I guess I'll start again. So thanks for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I know about UDL and the way that I use it in my instruction, and hopefully leave you with some more information and some strategies to use it and promote the use of universal design for learning practices in our teaching, particularly in the post-secondary ed, and particularly as many of us have moved to online instruction. If you have any questions or thoughts or contributions at any point during this time that we spend together, please just feel free to chime in. That's how I do it in my classes, and I think it's better than having to hold on to it. So if there's anything you want to say or add or ask, please just chime in. And without anything else, I'll get started and hopefully we'll have a good time. Okay, so just a little bit for our agenda. We'll do a little bit on the background, very little bit about on the background of universal design for learning. We'll talk about it as a means of ensuring equity in education. I'll give you some examples of UDL in instruction, and we'll have some time for questions and answers. I'd also like to give you a second to make sure you have a piece of paper and a writing implement handy. So if you don't and you could do that, that would be awesome. And I can give you a couple seconds for that. You're not going to need it right off the bat, so you have a minute or two, you have a little bit of time to gather that together. So I like to state the outcomes or the objectives. I hope at the end you'll be able to describe the principles and practices of UDL. I hope you'll be able to identify instructional practices that align with those principles and practices. I hope this will help you construct lessons or activities based on the principles and practices of UDL, and evaluate the effect of UDL on student performance. And I don't mean that in a research way. I mean that in a way that you can determine how your use of UDL impacts student learning. So I want to start off with a little bit of a little question here. So this is an image of New York, City Hall of New York City. And this goes back to like the 1800s. And really, my question for you with this is, what we can see the construction. How would that building be different if it were constructed today? If we were to construct that building today, what would be different about that building? So just think about that. It's kind of rhetorical at this point, but just think about that for now. Okay. This is a popsicle stick house. Okay. You can see that many of us have probably built these over our years. Okay. If we were face to face, I would probably have us build popsicle stick houses. We would do some kind of an activity. What do you notice about this house? Anyone? I'll give you a prompt. What's it missing?
Door.
The door.
Okay, it's missing a door. Good, thanks. Yes, it's missing windows, right? So now I forgot to tell you when you built the house that we needed the people who own the house, who are going to own the house, they want to see out the windows. They don't want little toothpick windows. They want to be able to see out the windows. Now we have to go back and we have to retrofit the house for windows. Okay, it's a lot more work to do it that way, right? Here is a very elaborate popsicle house. Okay, we created this beautiful popsicle stick house and it's all wonderful. But we have to sell it. We have to move out. It's too much house for us. And now we have to sell it. And the people who want to buy it, are either wheelchair users or they have knee issues. What's the problem?
No handicap ramp.
Yeah, there's no ramp. Needs an elevator. Yeah, there's no accessibility. It is not accessible. If we had built it with accessibility in mind, though, it would be easier for everybody. Maybe we even have visitors. Maybe it's our house and we're keeping it, but we have visitors who can't use stairs or for whom stairs are difficult. Okay. So what I want to start off with now that I've sort of given you some food for thought is, what do you know? And if you could add your comments to the chat, what do you know about UDL? And there we go. So I'm going to pop on the, okay, great. So think about your students before planning. Access, great. Okay, modifications that benefit many. It's getting more used for building public libraries. Okay, multiple avenues for achieving goals. These are great answers. So you have some background knowledge. I want to give everybody a chance if anybody else has anything to say before I move on. So in the same chat, if you would sort of address the question of, whoops, did I just go back? What do you want to know? I'm here. I know, I know a pretty good deal about it. What do you want to know about UDL? Why are you here? Okay, more concrete strategies. I think we can do that. And maybe that's the consensus, that people want more concrete strategies. So hopefully you'll be able to leave with those. Okay, so moving ahead, just one more example. You can see this is a cartoon that we use all the time. And you can see there's a person who uses a wheelchair who says to this guy who's shoveling the snow on the stairs, could you please shovel the ramp? And the guy says, all these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I'll clear the ramp for you. And the guy in the wheelchair, the guy who uses the wheelchair says, but if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in. And that is the whole underlying principle of UDL. If you shovel the ramp, we can all get in. We can all use the ramp. Everybody can't use the stairs, but we can all use the ramp. So why do we use UDL? We use UDL because it considers the widest range of experiences, abilities, challenges levels of motivation and cultural linguistic differences. It offers the largest number of access points for students. Okay. UDL stems from research in neuroscience, learning sciences, and cognitive psychology, and it's rooted in the zone of proximal development. Okay. It emphasizes the importance of scaffold, and it allows scaffolds to fade as the students gain expertise. Really, my thought on it is it's really good, solid teaching. So let's look at this graphic, because I think this really shows, this also makes a really good point. Okay. So we've seen this graphic. I think probably most of us have seen this. We talk about equality, we talk about equity, and we talk about accessibility. So equality is a great goal, but it's not equitable always, as you can see in this image. And if somebody were to come up and, you know, that person didn't have access to those boxes, they wouldn't be able to see the game. But with a chain link fence, they would be able to see the game. So we want to try and build our instruction with the most accessibility as possible. Are we going to hit every single learner every single time? Maybe not, but we're going to at least have given it a really good try. Okay, so UDL is predicated on a basic set of values. And that idea is that we expect diversity. Not only do we expect diversity in our classes, we appreciate diversity, and we know that it contributes positively to our climate, to our learning outcomes, and to our community quality. Okay. And we know that human commonalities cut across social constructed categories of things like race and class and gender, sexual orientation, and disability. Those are constructs, right? We know that there is more of us that is alike. So it is not, we can't just make assumptions. What we have to assume is that more people will benefit from us putting more out there and more access points out there. That's the one assumption we can make. The other thing that I want to say is we have a range of students in our classrooms and in our courses. We don't necessarily know about their backgrounds. What we do know in the disability world is we know that students often are very reluctant to access their accommodations. They may have had accommodations in high school, and they may not want to access them in college. They may not know how to access them in college. They may not want their instructors to know they need accommodations, and they may not think they're still entitled to them. So when we use principles and practices of UDL, we offer some of those things that we would consider accommodations in our general instruction. So one real quick example before I get into, you know, some more of the content here is, I don't really like to give quizzes, but in some of the survey courses, I feel like it's something, you know, that I kind of have to do, or that I do. But what I do is, if the quiz, I think, you know, is a 30-minute quiz, I just set the time for 45 minutes for everybody. So I don't have to have a student who comes to me with, you know, a letter from ORS. I don't have to get a letter from ORS to say, okay, I'm just going to give you extended time. Everybody's going to get extended time, period, end of sentence. Okay. I also, you know, I don't know how many of you may know this. So if I'm repeating something, you know, I apologize. Obtaining or accessing accommodations can be really hard because you have to have documentation of a disability. And if you don't have documentation of that disability, getting that documentation can be very costly. So if you have to have a psychoeducational evaluation, that can run, you know, quite a bit of money, over $1,000 easily. Everybody doesn't have access to that. So we need to also realize that we have students in our classes who may not be identified by ORS, but who really would benefit from some of these principles and practices. So a little bit more about learner variability, or a little bit about learner variability. This is a functional MRI of 3 different individuals performing the same task. And the idea is to show that their brains are activated differently and in different areas by the same task. The task is tapping their finger. Okay. So in the blue areas, you can see that that really gives a low level of activity is lighting up on their brain. Red is a high level. Look at the brain on the far right. There's a lot of activity going on in that brain from the tapping, but we don't see much yellow, right? So what we have to realize is that different people respond to different activities in a different way. In other words, they're engaged differently. So what I might find really engaging, somebody else might, find awful. So we have to be aware of that as well, which I'm sure we are. There are 3 overarching principles in universal design. And so we talk about the 3 principles as being multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. And that I'll dig into that a little bit more. So when we talk about multiple means of engagement, this is really the why of learning. This is how we're going to make instruction relevant. So how are we communicating to students why something is important? Okay, and how do we keep them motivated? How do we keep them engaged? We keep in mind that feelings, values, or emotions that can influence attitudes towards learning, how somebody feels about something. So say, for instance, if a student has had a hard time with, say, math, okay, and they come into a math class, how are they automatically going to feel with that math class, and how much harder is it going to be to engage them and even really build their confidence? Okay. We know from research that the way a student or a learner feels about learning is going to impact their motivation and their level of engagement. So we know all of that. So what are we going to do to try and help hook them and keep them engaged? So when we talk about influences on affect, there's so many different things that can impact a student's approach to a course. It can be neurological, it can be cultural, personal relevance, subjectivity, background knowledge. But what else? What else can influence a student and their perception of learning and of maybe even a particular course? Anybody have any thoughts about that? Prior success? Absolutely. Yep, prior success is definitely going to impact that. Anything else? Self-efficacy? Yeah, do they think they can do it? Prior failure? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I can say from firsthand experience, I went in my doctoral program, I went into my stats class prepared to fail and sort of against it. Like, I'm never going to be able to do this. Yeah. Instructor greeting. That's a really good one too. Attitude, all of those. Yeah. Does the instructor connect with the students? There's a lot of research on that. Taking just time to talk to your students and chat with them can increase engagement by a lot. Attitude and Jen, is that the student's attitude or the instructor's attitude?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Well, because you said about statistics. So I thought about, our personal kind of attitude about how we want to approach something, or if we're willing to approach something.
Sure, absolutely. And
Even
if the instructor senses that or has a sense, knows about that or gets a sense of it, how does the instructor approach it? I was really lucky that my stats professor was amazing.
Right.
And so that made my attitude much better. I was like, he's not really judging me. He's really just trying to help me.
I also was just thinking, like, who else is in the class, or what's the name of the class? Those kind of things can be intimidating, I would think.
Absolutely. And what about the instructor themselves? What they've heard about the instructor?
Oh, right.
Right. So I think that's all part of it. So we want to be really, aware of those things as well. as we attempt to engage students and try and keep them engaged. Okay, so what do we do in post-secondary ed? How do we try and engage students? Several years ago, we actually conducted a survey where we asked instructors if they used the following practices and to what extent they use them, like by percentage. And the results were really interesting to me. And we're still working on those data. I was trained in single case design, and this was a survey, so there's a lot of fancy statistics that have to be done. I'm not the statistician doing that. I think I've already disclosed my challenges with stats, but we were trying to sort of parse out, were there differences between the schools, between ages of instructors? What were the differences of using these practices? And so we're still looking at that. But what we found is that in a lot of cases, we're not using these practices as in general. Many of us are not. Many of us are, though. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to state the purpose of the lesson. Why do you have to be here? Why are you here? What's the point? So starting even with an agenda and objectives helps students anchor and connect to what's being expected of them, or what's expected of them, and what's being taught for the day or for the lesson or whatever. Hook them with an activating activity or a strategy. How can you get them engaged? How can you get them to be interested in what you want to share with them? Provide scaffolds for assignments and include feedback. That feedback will allow them to make adjustments, and it'll allow them to be more successful. It also helps you understand where you are in your instruction. I think in a way too, although it seems time consuming, it really helps decrease the time you have to spend grading, because you've already previewed something and you've been able to help right the wrongs. If they're going off course, you're able to correct that. Makes it easier to get them on the right course, and then really to grade the final product. So allow students to make choices when possible. Give them timelines to task assignment or completion. Maybe assignment bundles. I think of it like an assessment buffet. Like if you want to earn an A, you can do this and this and this. If you want to earn this number of points, you can do these activities. That gives them some choice in how they're going to progress through, and how they're going to ultimately, which we'll get to, show their knowledge. Podcasts, video conferencing options for lectures. Format choice. I'm in teacher education. I'm in pre-service and in-service teacher education. We do a lot of reflecting. We want our pre-service teachers to reflect a lot. So I have students do a lot of reflecting. I allow them to submit it. In my only rule, the only way that you can't submit something in my class for the most part is interpretive dance. And the only reason that they can't submit interpretive dance is because I know nothing about dance, and I have no way of scoring it or of understanding what they're trying to communicate to me. But typically, if they don't want to write something, they'll submit it in a video. I've had some amazing submissions when they get the option to do an alternate format. Service learning, when possible. One of the courses I teach does service learning with Beyond Academics. And I don't know if you all are familiar with Beyond Academics. If you're not, I hope that you will become familiar. But if you don't, it's our 4-year comprehensive transition program for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So my students do service learning, and it's really like in the form of peer tutoring. We found that the reflections were so deep and rich from that experience that one of my doc students and I are actually going to write it up. She does some qualitative work, but we're going to write it up for publication, because it's too good not to share. It's amazing how much my students are getting out of that experience. and how hands-on it is and how much they're able to connect things from their courses into that experience. Again, allow video, audio, or written options for self-reflection, and then use individual response systems such as clickers or response cards. And, you know, if we're virtual, how do we engage them virtually? What platforms can we use to engage them virtually? Are we looking for a hand raise? I taught a course earlier today, and I had one student out of, well, there are only 8 in the class, but out of 8, only one had their camera on. And I was so sad because a lot of us rely on that feedback. If I can't see their faces, I don't know whether they're engaged or whether I've put them to sleep. So, you know, we've got to keep them engaged. Those response systems help with that. Okay. Provide corrective feedback on rough drafts. Again, I do a thing with students where I'll preview it for free. So if you send it to me by a certain time or date, I will preview it. I will give you free feedback. I call it, this is your chance to get free feedback. Make the changes, and then I'll grade the final. You know, I'll grade the final. And that's even, I even do that on scaffolded assignments, things that I usually pretty heavily scaffold my assignments. And then if they've really tanked it, are we worried about the grade or are we worried about the process? If a student does really poorly on something, didn't we give them that assignment so that they can gain mastery over whatever we're trying to get them to demonstrate? So I think allowing them to revise really allows it to be more relevant for them and allows them to learn more and it doesn't let them, you know, or it can help hold them a little bit more accountable in case they decide that they just want to sort of try and slide it through. You know, individual partner, small group activities, I think can often help engage students. I also like to make sure that they have the option to work alone if they don't want to necessarily work with a partner. Rubrics basically really help them understand why you want them to demonstrate something, and really it really gives them the guidelines that they need to be able to be successful. Games and simulations, obviously we do a lot of field learning and education, and non-traditional seating arrangements. Even just the way that you arrange the classroom can be really impactful in engaging students. So here's just a brief little chart, which gives you some sort of a bullet list of some of these things that you can use in your teaching. Okay, so it's a little bit of a repeat, but it's just a little bit of a little graphic organizer there. This is on my Padlet, which is a resource at the end of this, and I think the slides will be shared out with you. Okay. So now is the time for our little activities. So if you would kindly, and I'm going to ask you to share, for those of you who are willing to share, if you could kindly make sure that you have a pen or pencil and a piece of paper, that would be awesome. And I'm going to get to my instructions because I didn't put the instructions up. So if everybody could give me a thumbs up when they're ready, that would be great. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Great. So I'm just going to give everybody one more second, make sure that they're all ready. Okay. So I'm going to read you some instructions, and you're going to hopefully follow my instructions. Okay. So at the top of your paper, please draw a 3/4 inch circle. Roughly, doesn't have to be perfect, 3/4 inch circle freehand. Draw a 1 1/4 inch line extending down from the bottom center of the circle. I'll repeat it. Draw a 1 1/4 inch line extending down from the bottom center of the circle. 1/3 of the way down the line, draw a 1/2 inch line at a 45-degree angle facing north on the left side. At the end of the line you just drew, draw a 1/4 inch line straight up or facing north. At the end of the 1/4 inch line you just drew, draw a circle about 1/4 inch in diameter. Okay, about 1/3 of the way down your line, draw a 1/2 inch line at a 45-degree angle facing north on the right side. At the end of the line you just drew, draw a 1/4 inch line straight up facing north. At the end of the 1/4 inch line you just drew, draw a circle about 1/4 inch in diameter. At the bottom of the 1 1/4 inch line, draw a 3/4 inch line at a 45-degree angle facing south on the left side. At the bottom of the 1 1/4 inch line, draw a 3/4 inch line at a 45-degree angle facing south on the right side. On the left side of the 3/4 inch line, add a small oval. On the right side of the 3/4 inch line, add a small oval. In the 3/4 inch circle, draw 2 small, about 1/8 inch circles, about 1/4 inch in from each side. In the middle of the circle, draw a circle about 1/4 inch in diameter. In the bottom 1/3 of the circle, draw an arc about 1/2 inch in length facing north. And when you are all finished, if you would kindly, you don't have to, but if you would kindly share your picture, that would be great. Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, hang on, keep them up because I've got to scroll through. Let's see who wants to share. I only have a few sharers. Okay, all right, thank you. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about it. Now, one thing I didn't control for is I did not turn the captioning off on the bottom of the slides. Okay, now if I'd been really savvy, I would have done that, but I didn't want to disrupt my flow. And I wasn't sure who was going to use it. So did anybody use the captions? No? Okay.
I did, but it messed up my drawing.
Okay, you did, but it messed up your drawing.
Because you said 1 1/4 inch, and so it wrote 1 line and 1/4 inch line, so it made it 2 lines.
Okay, so the captioning messed you up. So let's talk about this. How was that getting that in an auditory format? Was that okay?
I will say it took me a few tries. So if you can tell, like it took me a few moments of thinking of like the bottom of the circle, and then I kept hearing it, but I was still drawing it inside.
Okay.
So it took me a few tries to finally get it. And then
Okay,
it was like attending to it, and then I was good.
Okay, cool, thank you.
I thought it was difficult until I started noticing what it was.
Right, right. So you used your prior knowledge and your schema to say, oh, look, she's having us draw a stick figure.
Yeah.
Okay. If I had asked you to, and I thought about it, like, well, what if I have them draw something that isn't really going to be easily recognizable, but I also didn't want to spend a huge amount of time just to make a point, right? So yeah, and I think that's a really important point. Once you connected it to your schema, you were able to make sense of it, and then it was a lot easier. Okay.
Right. I'm not sure it was accurate because I didn't have anything to measure with.
Right. Right. Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for playing along. All right. Anybody else? So,
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think because I do better with visual than auditory, I was hearing you, but I also kept trying to read, and then eventually it just kind of threw me off, and I got behind. Because there was nothing left to read.
And what I tried to do is I tried to pick up the pace so that the captions would leave before people, I kind of tried to pick it up. And then then I said something at the end to make the captions disappear. Okay. Now, when I teach, I use the captions on my PowerPoint when I teach. In the beginning, my students felt it was a little bit distracting, but I had so many students who really liked it that to me, it's another access point. And speech to text has gotten so advanced that it's pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate. It's more accurate now than it was a year ago, which I think is interesting, but I think we're just going to continue to see those advances. Okay, so there was actually a point to all of this besides having fun. I did field test this with my son to see how he would do, and he got it, but I think part of it was the same as what Jen said, is like when he realized what it was, it made it a lot easier, right? So this kind of moves us and segues us into multiple means of representation. So how we represent what we're teaching or how we present our information to students. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're getting all this information and then we have to assimilate it or accommodate it, right? So if you're in education, you know that we're going to assimilate it or we're going to accommodate it. We're going to work it into our existing schema. And Jen, thank you for that, because you literally that's exactly how it works. Once we know how to make sense of it, we can do more with it, right? We can learn it once we can connect it to something we know, or we have to completely start from scratch. So I show my students a picture of a completely random creature that I designed. And I say to them, what is this? This is how I teach schema. What is this thing? And then we spend lots of time talking about what it could possibly be. And I've made it have features of a bunch of different animals. So it has wings of a bee, and it has the body of a bee and wings, but then it has legs, but it has maybe 8 legs instead of 6 legs, and it has pointy ears, and it has it has like features of a bunch of different animals. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. The point is to teach them how they go through their schema to try and categorize it. And that's what we do with new information, right? We try and categorize it. How we present information to students is going to impact how they categorize that information and how they make heads or tails out of it. So it's how we represent it. If we only represent things the way that I did in an auditory fashion, right, then we're not going to get everybody. We're going to get somebody who lost track of where we were. We're going to get somebody who missed something. So how do we try and mitigate that or make that content more accessible so they have different access points to the information? Sometimes I'll hear students say, well, I'm a visual learner. Well, I'm an auditory learner. Well, I'm kinesthetic. Some of them are everything. For me, I have to see the directions and I have to hear them, but I can't only hear them. If I only hear them, if my husband gives me a list to go to the grocery store with or to go to the store with or whatever, and he doesn't give it to me in writing, I'm only going to come back with 3 or 4 of the things on the list because it's gone. It's gone. I have other things going on in my brain. It's very busy in there, and it doesn't have time for all of the little details. So I have to have it in writing, and I don't think I'm alone in that. So multiple means of represent. Oh, I'm totally missed the chat. Sorry. Let me try and catch up there. Okay. Got it. My images, my little boxes of everybody's, people are covered the little thing that showed the chat. So multiple means of representation addresses learner variability, which comes also from a lot of different contexts, right? Same thing. So when we represent content in multiple ways, we enable the content to be accessed by the student's preferred access points. So how do we do that? So some of the things that we do that are helpful, and this was something that we found in our survey, things like giving PowerPoints in advance of class lectures. we found that, I can't remember what the number was, but very few instructors provide the PowerPoints in advance of the class lectures. The common feeling is that if I give them those slides, they won't come to class. So when I was teaching high school back in the day, and this goes back to the early 2000s, I always taught using PowerPoint. And for context for you, I taught psychology and sociology is what I taught for my first 3 years of teaching high school. I taught psychology and sociology, and I always gave them the PowerPoints. And I always tell my students, I want you to make notes, not take notes. I want you to highlight. I want you to, I'm going to give you an anecdote or I'm going to give you an example. Write that down. Don't start frantically writing everything that comes out of my mouth, because a lot of what comes out of my mouth may not be relevant to you. So how do we make sure that they can do that? To me, it's giving them the PowerPoints in advance. Caption the videos. Does anybody here watch TV with the captions on? Give me a thumbs up if you watch TV with the captions on. And just keep those thumbs up so I can see it. Thanks. Okay, so quite a few of you. Does anybody want to share why? Why do you use closed captioning? I'll check the chat this time.
Hello.
Okay, so someone says their husband has trouble hearing. Okay, fair enough. That's a good reason to use captioning.
For me, English is my second language, so it's easier for me to read instead of listen.
Okay, that's a great point. So if English is your second language, it's easier to read. Okay. Somebody watches programs, Kelly watches programs in other languages. Anyone else?
I said that I watch BBC, so I know the language. It's just the accent sometimes, or you miss something and you can't go back.
Very good. Yep, you miss something and you can't go back. Right. It helps understand, just helps me understand what's being said. Exactly. We watch them in my house too. We use captions, and it's the same thing. It's getting it in both ways. You might not hear something or you might miss something. It really helps you kind of stay current with it. So you can assume the same thing might be the case with our students. Some of you said you checked the captions when I was reading those directions. You missed what I said, so you wanted to check the captions. So it's reasonable to think our students are experiencing that too. Pre-teaching vocabulary. So I'm a huge vocabulary. I love vocabulary. I love words. I love language. What I find is students often don't know, they don't have very wide vocabularies. Their vocabularies are not, to me, at least this has been my experience, they're not quite where I would hope they would be. A lot of that, as we know, those of us in education know that a lot of that comes from reading, right? The more you read, the more your vocabulary grows. But we can pre-teach vocabulary, right? We can front load the vocabulary to help them be familiar with terms. We can activate background knowledge, use visuals, charts, and pictures, videos, audio clips for hands-on activities. One of the skills that we have to teach, or that I want to make sure that my students, my special ed, who are going to be special ed teachers, learn, is how to do a task analysis. I don't know if you're familiar with the task analysis, but it's literally it's a step-by-step down to minute details. And I came up with an activity to do with my students, to teach them how to do a task analysis. This happened, I had like a brainstorm over winter break, and ordered the materials, and I'm now getting ready to send them out packets. We're going to do the task analysis together. We have to create something. It's actually, I don't know if you can see it. It's a fidget. Okay. It's just a little fidget thing. Whoops. So we're going to create the fidget together in class. Then they have to write a task analysis on how to do it. And then they have to use their task analysis to teach somebody else, or to make this fidget with somebody else. So I have to send them 3 sets of these. But I feel like that's going to be really impactful for them, because they get hands-on, and then they can see the value of the task analysis and of how explicit it has to be. Okay, provide comprehensive print and electronic syllabus specifying course requirements, course expectations, and due dates. Provide the syllabus in an alternate format that engages visuals. I use a living syllabus in some of my classes where it's a Google site. And that way, if they want to access it from their phone or from wherever, they just bookmark the link. Canvas does this well too, but I was not proficient enough in Canvas to make it work. Although one of my courses is like that on Canvas. Examples or illustrations. Audio files. When I explain an assignment, even when we were face-to-face, if I explain an assignment, I always audio recorded myself explaining it, and then I post it on Canvas for the kids. I call them kids. Advanced organizers to help them highlight essential course concepts. Just use different formats when you're presenting content. Make sure the materials you're using are accessible. Textbooks that offer ebook options are great because if there's a vocabulary word they don't understand, they can click the vocabulary word. They can click that word and get the definition. Cooperative group activities, and again, graphic organizers. And here's just another one of those little charts. All right. So moving on to multiple means of action and expression. This is the how. This is how they're going to show you what they've learned. This is how they're going to demonstrate their learning to you. Okay. So how do we let them complete assignments? Are we testing them? Is it only tests? Are they turning in projects? What flexibility do we give them when they're turning in projects? Are we giving them checklists? When I give a project, when I have a project in a rubric, even in the project instructions, I usually make it with little ballot boxes, those little squares. They can check it off as they go through each step. How are we assessing them? Are we using only quizzes? Are we using essays, video responses? This is how I learned this. I had a student when I was teaching psychology at the beginning of my teaching career. I was teaching high school psychology, and she literally flipped. We had a test and she flipped. She just had a lot of test anxiety. So I pulled her outside and I said, "What do you know?" And she started spilling everything that she knew. I knew she had the concepts that she needed. She had mastery. She just could not at that moment take the test or the quiz. So she got her A or whatever it was, demonstrated what she knew, and I satisfied the requirement of knowing that she had mastered the concepts. Make sure students have opportunities to practice, chances to respond. This is all part of that scaffolding. Lots of different assessment formats. Detailed descriptions of assignments. I recommend that we as instructors complete assignments we're asking our students to do. I typically don't give students an assignment that I haven't completed because it allows me to see where the barriers might be. How do I know if something's going to be hard? Now, there may be barriers that I don't foresee, but it wipes out a lot of that. It really helps a lot of that. Encourage the use of technology. And then here's a little chart for that one as well. And again, this is on the PowerPoint, which you'll have access to. So I wanted to leave some time for questions. If anybody has questions, if there's anything specific that I can guide you with, or at the end of the slide, there's some resources for you as well.
Well, can we have access to your PowerPoint, Debra?
Yes. I think that is going to definitely be shared.
Yes.
Yeah, there it is. It's in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized there's a typo in it. So I apologize, but it says multiple mean of engagement, and it should be means. And I think that's just because I was probably typing.
Well, you expressed yourself in oral ways as well. So we'll let it go this time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for that grace. Any other questions, any specific questions about things that you might want to do in your classroom or in classroom, but with your students?
I just want to say thank you, because I knew in general a lot about UDL, but I didn't. I think always the engagement versus the action expression would confuse me because they sound
They
similar.
do.
And so you gave us so many examples. I think that that's really going to help me, and also thinking about the hook. And then while you were talking, I went and made my PowerPoint for tomorrow available already. I normally hold off, so I think that makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. Good. That's great. There are some amazing assistive technologies, and I didn't even cover assistive technology, but there are some amazing assistive technologies to help students, not only students with disabilities, but I'm actually teaching the assistive technology course this summer. But there's one we were getting ready to do a study, and it's called Glean, and it's note taking, and it allows you you can import the PowerPoint, and then you can literally like tag it, where you drop like an emoji, and you can leave a note that says, go back and study this, and it tags it in the audio recording. So, be aware that there's some really fantastic technology out there for our students as well. Thank you, Jen. Any other questions? Anything I can do to answer any questions?
It was great. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Holzberg.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
I have a comment about the way the exercise where we were drawing things. And in my Foundations of Library and Information Science class, when I taught face-to-face, students would be put into groups, and they were told to give instructions on making a bed, using the ATM, pumping gas. And there would be students that were out in the hall that didn't know what the assignment was. And then they were to give instructions. And it was just so weird because they would say exactly what you said. And of course, nobody could really do things very well. And I said, well, why didn't you go show them? One was Dance the Macarena. And I said, you could have found a video that showed them how to dance the Macarena. So do you have any insights into why when someone says give directions, we default to some sort of verbal management that is pretty much bound to fail? They were funny, really funny, but inefficient.
Well, then I think also of like the telephone game. So when you get instructions and how much just gets lost, right? I think we're just creatures of habit. I really do. I think we just do it that way because that's how it was done when we were in school. And it doesn't really occur to us to do it any other way until we see that there's a barrier. If we recognize the barrier, then we're willing to, find ways to I don't know, to try and mitigate the barrier. I had, and Julie, I think you'll appreciate this. I have my master's students doing, in my UDL class, doing a UDL literature review, okay? So they have to go on the library website and they have to search. So in order to teach them, there's really explicit instructions on the Canvas site because the online people help develop it and they're rock stars over there. But I took them through, including screenshots. We did it together. Why don't we do that? Why don't we? So I think I just think we're creatures of habits. Like,
well, it was an eye opener, but I can't teach that to every class. So, it's one of those things that we hit or miss sometimes with teaching, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the more explicit we can be, I think, sometimes we're like, well, we don't want to give them too much because we want them to be able to manage and to navigate systems. But I also think like, sometimes we have to get them started. It's like writing the first paragraph of an essay. Sometimes you just need that first paragraph and then you can run with it.
It's that first sentence.
Mhm. Yeah.
Everybody in the world thinks this, and it's like, no, that's not the best way to start. So
So I just try and give them the first sentence to make things as accessible as possible for them. Lots of examples. I usually will post like, so for the literature review assignment they have, I have an example of a literature template filled out. This is the information. So I have one example for them so they can follow it. I made an APA sort of common APA errors type of thing for them. Just things to support them and to especially right now in the midst of COVID where people are just generally more stressed out than they typically might be. But I also find that our students have really high levels of anxiety. And our kids juggle a lot. Like, let's be real, they're balancing a lot. They're working a couple jobs, some of them, and many of them. And so I try and take the mystery out of things. And that just opens up access. Does that make sense?
yes, thank you, Deborah.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Holzberg or comments? I see some applause.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll make
so
one
much.
quick comment, and that it was about your step-by-step directions. And I think the point of the step-by-step activity was to see the value of being very explicit in the step-by-step instructions. And for instructional design, that's critical. And I'm teaching that instructional design intro class this semester. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to ingrain is if you're creating an instructional design project, and you're remembering that you're the instructional designer, you have to create exact step-by-step because someone else is actually the instructor. And to step out of that role is difficult for students. So I really like that activity. And I'm going to write my online class tonight.
Well, there you go. I did it with my students last night. I did. And one of the people drew the stick figure sideways and she just had a really hard time with it. And the other point of it was to say, everybody's not going to get it in one way. So how else could we have done that activity? Right. And so I think that's just a really important point. In my instructional design class, my students have to design a unit and then the unit has to culminate with a project that their students have to complete. But my students have to complete the project using the directions they're going to give their students. I hope that makes sense. But that really shows them like, that's why you have to do the project. You've got to work through those barriers. Yeah, thank you for that feedback. So my email's there. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you ever just want to bounce ideas off, or if you can think of something that you think would be great, just let me know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks again for the opportunity. It was fun.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I really enjoyed your workshop, and those are really great recommendations. I know I am definitely going to incorporate those into my own teaching. I would like to take a moment to just quickly remind everyone of some upcoming events in the CDLC. We just had our part 1 of our book study yesterday, but we will be having part 2 on February 9th. Again, we're doing a book study of Cultivating Genius, an Equity Framework for Culturally and Historically Responsive Literacy by Dr. Goldie Muhammad. And it will be from 3 to 4 p.m. that day, February 9th. We also have our conference coming up, and Dr. Goldie Muhammad is our keynote speaker. It's the 3rd annual Diversity in Language and Culture Conference. It's going to be Saturday, February 20th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and that is online. And please look out for the emails with links to register. Well, that's all for today then, unless someone else has something to add.
Have a great one.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.